Wednesday, which was Ash Wednesday, we told the story of creation. And so the tree here is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This was, again, the story from Genesis that really is the explanation for why it is that we are sinful. Why can't we be perfect? And so also in that kind of once Eve offered the fruit to Adam and he ate, and God pronounces the curses or whatever, the implications of that action. We have the words, remember that you are dust, or remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So that was our story for Ash Wednesday. From Genesis, the beginning of the story. After that, of course, there's the story of Cain and Abel and the first murder. There's also the story of the great flood, Noah's Ark. There's the story of the Tower of Babel. And then there's a long genealogy then that tells the lineage from Adam and Eve all the way up to a man named Terah. Terah lived in a place called Ur, which was right on the Persian Gulf, so way down the southern end of Iraq. And it said that Terah had a son, his name was Abram, who was married to a wife named Sarai. There was also a nephew named Lot. And Terah took Abram and Sarai, and they traveled. I'm kind of going by here because scholars, in Genesis chapter 2, it talks about how the Garden of Eden was between the Tigris and the Euphrates. So imagine I'm walking up the Euphrates, going north, up into what is modern-day Syria. And there's a town there called Haran. And this is where Terah with his son Abram and his wife Sarai and their nephew Lot lived. While in Haran, God spoke to Abram. This is from Genesis chapter 12. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram heard the call from God and left his father, left Haran, and headed down toward Canaan. So kind of walking, eventually got to the Sea of Galilee and started following the Jordan River. And Bob was right, this is a tent. Not so much the Lent tent, kind of a fun thing about it. But it's a tent because Abram was a person on the move. This is Abram. And you can tell he's walking. Most of Abram's story is about being on the move. And so he went down to Canaan for a while, and then it says that he traveled on because there was a famine, because Sarai, and they went to Egypt for a while. And then I guess once they heard things were the famine had broken, they went back to Canaan. And once they were there, again, his nephew Lot went with him, and at one point they decided, this land isn't big enough for the both of us, sort of. But Abram settled on to the west side of the Jordan River, and Lot settled on the east side of the Jordan River. By this time, Abram and Sarah were getting quite old, and they were starting to wonder how it was that God was going to make this great nation of them, since they didn't have any children. So, from Genesis chapter 15, then we have a promise from God. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, and your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me, for I continue childless, and the heir of my house, Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, you have given me no offspring, so a slave born in my house is to be my heir. But the word of the Lord came to him. This man shall not be your heir. No one but your very own issue shall be your heir. He brought him outside and said, look toward heaven and count the stars, if you are able to count them. And he said to him, so shall your descendants be. And he believed the Lord, and the Lord reckoned it to him as righteousness. The story continues on, and Abram and Sarah do have a son named Isaac. And at that point, God said, you're no longer going to be called Abram, which means father. You're going to be Abraham, which means father of many. And your wife Sarah is no longer going to be called Sarah, which means, I think it's queen. No, she'll be called Sarah, which means queen of many.
Oh,
So if I were to sum up,
I don't know why he changed the name. Not really.
I just had this memory of the confirmation class. We were watching these videos on some of the patriarchs, and there was one on Abraham. And the only words that Abraham says the whole time is, okay. Okay. Literally, those are the only words he said the whole time.
I'm sure you said that.
Anyways, but if I were to sum it up though, it is, the main thing about Abram and Abraham, he said yes. He said yes. And God reckoned to him as righteousness. And the announcements I mentioned about the iftars, because it's during Ramadan. And we were at an iftar last night. And once again, my wife reminded me that our relationship with Muslims was a mistake. It started some 11 years ago when a couple of nice-looking young men came to our worship service or our church at the cross. And I didn't even notice them until after the service when I remember said, hey, they want to talk to you. And there was Malik, and I think the name of the other one didn't stick, but Malik became a good friend. But they were there to invite us to an interfaith dinner. And we said yes. But it was a mistake because they had intended to go to the United Church at the other end of the wall. And of course, we were invited to dinner, free food. We didn't really know much about this Muslim community, and so we said yes. And we just kept on saying yes. And part of the reason I guess you could say we're adventurous, or we were hungry, we liked good food. But I think if there's anything to be acknowledged is that we were a little bit hopeful. But we just kept saying yes. And that yes has turned into wonderful friendships. And I've come to appreciate how it kind of seems like it was a yes that allowed kind of at least us Lutherans to reach out again to the Hizbut community, part of the Muslim community, to shake hands and become friends. And I've learned to claim that and recognize that as God's opposite. A simple yes to an invitation. Abram was a little bit bigger yes, or asked, go to a completely different land. But he just kept saying yes, and God used that. Now, the Jews point to Abraham as their father. It's like the father of Israel, the father of the community. And even in the New Testament, Paul talks about the righteousness of Abraham. So it's easy to say, wow, Abraham was somebody really special, really unique. If you read the story, though, you'll find that he was very much human. I mentioned that at some point they left where they had set up their tent there in Canaan, the oaks of Mamre, as they say, and went to Egypt. As he was going to Egypt, he and Sarah had a conversation, because they were married, husband and wife. But he said, Sarah, you're really beautiful. And if we go to Egypt, and the Pharaoh or the leaders want you because you're so beautiful, they'll just kill me, and then they can take you as a wife. So And then Pharaoh finds out, gets all upset, and because Onan that finds out that they're really husband and wife, and there's all kinds of bad things that are happening. And so he sends them away with all these treasures and stuff. But it's not the most admirable trait of Abraham to kind of pawn off his wife just to save his own skin. I don't know. And then it actually happens at another time too. Also mentioned that Abraham and Sarah had Isaac, who is then the lineage that continues on through, and keeps on going down through King David, etc. But before that, Abraham had this promise from God that he would have descendants, but still he hedged his bets. You can blame Sarah a little bit. She said, here, it doesn't seem to be happy with me, so here, take my handmaiden and have a child with her. And so they did. That's Ishmael, who then is kind of the spiritual ancestor of our Muslim friends. Again, not the most admirable trait, I would say. The reason I highlight these is if you pay attention to the stories in the Old Testament over and over, it's very clear that God is working with a bunch of humans. Guess what? We're humans too. You don't have to be perfect for God to use you, for God to work through you, for you to be someone that's part of what God is up to in the world. In fact, it seems quite often that God will take the folks that are quite perfect and know that they're not sinful. I mean, know that they are sinful and to do the most amazing things. Because they quite often are the ones most in touch with God's grace. So the story of Abraham, I think, is what can happen, what God can do when we say yes. Now, I don't know if God is calling you to go to Syria or Egypt or the Holy Land right now and do something. So then there's a question, what does it mean to say yes to God? How do you know that what you're saying yes to is of God? So it's a real basic framework. I've got this in conversations with my wife. Is a good place to look is where three things intersect. One is, what brings you joy? The next is, what are you good at? And the last is, what is the work that needs to do? In the place where those three intersect, what brings you joy, what you have gifts and abilities, what you're good at, and the work that needs to do, as far as what that work that there is to do, as far as being of service to the world, how might God want to bless the world, what needs to be done. So those places intersect. It's a good place to look and just discern that God is calling you into action. That God is asking you, will you do this for my sake and for the sake of the world? And I would encourage you